Welcome back to our series, What's Really in Your Best Interest. Mike Stenhouse here with my colleague Justin Katz, discussing whether or not the unemployment rate is really in our best interest as a way to measure economic well-being. The center, largely through the work of Justin, has come up with a new index called the Jobs and Opportunity Index, JOY, which we talked about in our prior segment. So now that we know what it is and why we need it, Justin, how is Rhode Island doing right now?
Well, it depends, of course, what metric you use. As you mentioned, the unemployment rate, if you look at a chart of unemployment of Rhode Island versus New England and the United States, since around 2010, it looks like Rhode Island is doing great. I mean, we've gone from having an unemployment rate that was technically 3 percentage points apart from New England and the United States to just this year now we're within about a half to 1 percentage point different. So we've suddenly had this great closing of the gap with unemployment, but it's really not a good indicator. As you discover by developing something like the Joy Index, which takes the other factors into account, we're actually losing a little bit of ground. And employment, for example, which this sort of the second factor, employment, jobs over welfare
We'll get
programs.
to the second factor in a second, but we're overall we're what in the nation on our joy index?
Oh, and overall on a joy index, we're 48th,
Right.
which is actually, we were higher than that, and we started our sort of collapse around the time that the unemployment rate would make it look like we were improving. So we were in the low 40s, ranging from 42 to say 44, around 2010. And then after that, we just boom, boom, boom. Every year we dropped another few steps, so that we've been 48 since 2012, according to this index.
So while the narrow unemployment rate shows Rhode Island improving, this broader jobs and opportunity index shows Rhode Island actually losing ground nationally. In fact, if you know the famous poem Casey at the Bat, I think we're going to be using the phrase right now. There is no joy in Mudville, as Mighty Casey has struck out. When it comes to Rhode Island's ranking on the Joy Index. So let's take a look at the three strikes and those three factors of which you alluded to a minute ago. So first is the job outlook factor, which is kind of similar but expanded to the traditional unemployment rate. How are we doing on that first strike one job outlook factor?
Well, before we get to that, though, I wanted to make a point that the joy scores, I think, in the trends they show are much more in keeping with how people feel. I mean, if you look at the anger of the electorate and the way people are responding to government recently, particularly with the cooler and warmer, I mean, the marketing campaign sparked outrage because people know things aren't getting better, and so that's a better reflection, I think, in the joy metric. As far as the specific factors, in the first one, we're we're actually, I'm bringing it up real quick here.
I think we're 47th overall on that one, the job outlook factor.
No, well, maybe we moved down since last week. The new numbers are out, but we're 48th in the job outlook factor, which makes sense because the reason our unemployment rate has been improving is that people are giving up looking. So that counts against us in this index. And that's been a downward trend for years now. Um,
We're actually losing ground on that factor against New England and national states, isn't that correct?
right. If you look through 2015, both the United States, New England, and Rhode Island were all on a slight uptick according to this factor. Probably, frankly, people who have been long-term unemployed can't be anymore because they've run out of time on that. So that could be a negative in
Gotcha.
itself. But so but New England and the United States overall improved more by this factor than Rhode Island did, and so we're losing ground on the job opportunity index, which is really, I think of it almost like an opportunity index because it's a sense that people have that if they look for work, if they're in the job market, maybe they'll find something.
All right, so
Um,
there's strike one on Rhode Island, the job outlook factor. The next factor is the freedom index, where I think we rank around 38th or so.
at the freedom factor, we're at 39 right now.
Okay.
Um, and this would be number of people who are employed or jobs available in the state versus different forms of welfare. So we don't do as badly here as we do everywhere else, although we could only wish that 39 were our worst ranking and not our best.
Right.
So we don't do as badly there, but even so, as a matter of trends, we've we've really lost a lot of ground versus the United States or the rest of New England. The gap for the freedom factor is much larger than for the job opportunities index.
So there we have it, strike two. Another swing and miss. All right, let's try the third pitch here. What about the prosperity factor? Where do we rank on that, and what is that?
Well, that one, which is income versus taxation, we're at 46th in the country. And here again, the gap has been growing slightly, but we've been losing ground. Not only in Rhode Island, but the rest of the country has been losing ground since 2008 by this factor. Just drifting downward. More taxes, less income. There you go.
Not good. I mean, in any good economy, the private sector should be dominating the government factor. But what we see here with both the freedom factor, strike two, and then strike three on the prosperity factor, the size of government is starting to dominate the size of the private sector and personal income. Well, there you have it. That's a brief look at the center's new Jobs and Opportunity Index. You'll be hearing a lot about that from us every month. Justin will be writing a new post on the index, and I'll give you a quick chance, 10 seconds for a close, Justin.
Well, what we really need to keep in mind here is that we want people to be in the private sector not out of some political preference, but because that's where people do work and create innovation and they grow the economy, rather than trying to figure out how to get a little more out of the system, which is not sustainable over the long run. You're just going to be stagnant and decreasing, and especially as a state comparing poorly with the rest of the country, we cannot afford that. We're just going to lose our population and lose our opportunity.
And speaking for our entire center, the Jobs and Opportunity Index was created to help lawmakers understand what's really going on in our state so they can craft public policy that addresses the real needs of real people based on a broader index. Thank you for watching today. This is Mike Stenhouse alongside with Justin Katz, thanking you for watching What's Really in Our Best Interest, and we'll see you again soon. Stay tuned.